this edition of Standards in Action seminar. My name is Simon Vrečar, and I'm the co-leader of ISO TC211 AG1 Outreach, and also head of delegation of Slovenian Standardization Institute at this plenary week. So as you can see, the title of today's seminar is Guide to the Role of Standard in Global Geospatial Information Management, the Standard Guide. Those of you that have attended already our last Standards in Action seminar may remember that, let's say, the main story of that one was doing standardization together. So today we are somehow continuing that, doing the standardization together with more emphasizing how to do the standardization, as you will see from the content later. Before we switch to the content, maybe just quickly a few housekeeping rules that were already explained in the previous introductory part by Mats, where you've also been able to get informed about some procedures and good practices of ISO TC211. So while you are not presenting or speaking, you are kindly asked to switch your microphone off and also the cameras. In case you have any questions, raise your hand or just put the comments and question in the chat window of the Zoom. But I think you are more or less all used to this. So this is a short overview of the agenda. As you will see, after my few words, there will be introduction of the by different standardization organization and the joint work. And the main core, of course, of today's seminar would be how to use the guide. As you can see, we have here prominent speakers all around the globe: Agneta, Mark, Young, Serena, Jill, Irina, Tobias, Sankey, and Shane. They will appear in that order, and also at the end there were some, let's say, closing remarks. So before going to the first part, maybe just to mention that this what will be presented today, the seminar and the guide, is actually a result of the long-year cooperation, actually, that on the standards guide began actually more than a decade ago. But in general, three organizations, three standardization bodies, ISO TC211, OGC, and IHO, have been formally cooperating practically since 1994. And this cooperation has been secured through different ways. So formal mechanisms like coordination groups, but also very much important by the people and the experts that are actively, let's say, working across all those organizations. And with all this work that has been done by organizations and by the experts, the Sustainable Development Goals and the work of the UN IGGIM has been supported as well. And as you may be aware, that also the work that will be presented today has been also endorsed this summer by this year by the UNGGIM. So not to speak from me too much, I will now announce, let's say, the first speakers that will actually present the joint work from the standardization bodies. And that would be Agneta Engberg, the chair of ISO TC211, Mark Reichert, Director of Strategic Opportunities from OGC, and Jon Beek, Assistant Director of International Hydrographic Organizations. So please, at this point, I would invite Agneta to say a few words from the ISO TC211 perspective. Please, Agneta.
Thank you, Simon, and thank you for organizing this seminar with the theme of the standards guide. And I would like to first say I'm so pleased to again meet with my standard guide colleagues and from different parts of the world, and my colleagues Mark and Yong from OGC and IHO. It's good to see you again, and this feels sort of like a little reunion. But however, we also haven't had that time to rehearse, so I think I will see a little bit of improvising during this session, and that's fine, because things have happened when we actually had this first seminar in September, early September or late August, I can't remember, at the UNGGIM session. So ISO TC211 Geographic Information Geomatics is the ISO entry point to the world of ISO, or to the world of geospatial standards. And as you can see here, the coverage of members around the world, the secretariat is here in Sweden. We are completely member-based. The members are the national standard bodies, and we also are very relying on our numerous amount of liaisons, both within ISO and also external. Like today, we connect and present the joint work with OGC and IHO. Yeah, I think we'll go to the next slide. My main slide then, presenting ISO TC211 a little bit from an outside-in perspective, and not looking maybe into the organization or things like that. What do we do that are of really value to people, or hopefully, or to communities internationally and nationally? Well, let's start at the general purpose geospatial standards, and I think that we share this in many ways with other standard development organizations, that there are a lot of general purpose standards that maybe not get the attention always that they deserve, because at the other end of this circle here, we have the standards in direct support of this global sustainable development goals, land administration, domain model, land cover, land use, addressing, and so on, which often at times are in the focus. And of course, all of these mentioned are actually now under revision and deserve the focus. There's a lot of work going on in these areas. Also, we are looking at the top part here, aligning the standards to the needs of other domains or other users, other technologies. And this is a constant ongoing process that particularly within ISO and other TCs, there are numerous amount of, there are many TCs in domains that are in need of location. And the one example where we have from TC211 reached the maybe most far in getting a consensus on common standards or common models is in the intelligent transport system area, where we are looking at a common or have agreed actually on a common model, which will be of use for many users around the world in the mobility sector. So this is really, really important to reach beyond the traditional mapping domain. And moving on then to the left, we have the ISO Geodetic Register, which is endorsed by the UNGGIM and in its support of the Global Geodetic Reference Frame. And at the lower part, we have the reaching out and the advancing of the implementation of standards. And this is very much what the standard guide is about. And I should say also that all of this actually we are doing in close cooperation with our cooperative partners here, OGC and other liaisons, and not the least is the standard guide. So at our website, you can find also user stories apart from those that we will talk about today in the standard guide. So these are the areas of focus for the TC211, which we think are important and need to be addressed. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Agneta, for these introductory words. So the next one I would invite would be Mark Reichert from OGC. So in advance, as we said at the beginning, there will be a bit of improvising. I hope that the slides has been not lost through the emails. So please, Mark.
Well, thank you very much for this opportunity to say a few words, and good morning, good afternoon, good evening to everyone. I just wanted to build on Agnieszka's comments that, this is all about advancing geospatial to be findable, accessible, interoperable, and reusable. And we're doing that in what I consider to be a wonderful partnership between the OGC, ISO TC211, IHO. And I couldn't be happier for some of the results that we're seeing in the guide that we'll be talking about today, but also I want to acknowledge the excellent collaboration that's occurred since we began working together back in the early 90s. This slide summarizes just a few of those activities that I think are important just to be able to recall as a community as we move forward into new areas. Of course, we've been working with the UN for several years now, and we've been collaborating on the Integrated Geospatial Information Framework, which is a core document in the UN GGIM initiative. We have been very, very heavily involved in maritime activities, most recently with IHO in transitioning maritime limits and boundaries to a digital conveyance based on S121. So OGC, using our innovation program, helped actually prototype the implementation of S121, and we're starting to see implementation of that nationally now around the world. And of course, as Agnieszka pointed out in her last slide, amongst the different sustainable development objectives and goals, land administration, built information is a big area of common interest, and we've been supporting land administration, data model effort, and a whole bunch of other activities related to built infrastructure between our organizations. Very, very recently, we've been supporting the advancement of an international health spatial data model, using the pandemic as a mechanism to understand the scope of data that's required, traditional and non-traditional, to deal with a health emergency. And that model is actually now being tested inside a current pilot that's focusing on disaster readiness and response. The disaster pilot that we have underway is looking very much at, how do you avoid dealing with data 80% of your time, and automating the process of creating analysis-ready data, as well as decision-ready information. And we're working right now with Peru, US, and Canada on 3 different scenarios: flooding, landslides, and pandemic response. And then OGC is working very hard in re-engineering the OGC Web Services standards under our Open API standards activity. And this will help us greatly simplify the use of open standards as building blocks, both for the web as well as in the cloud. So we're really looking forward to further cooperation on these and other projects. And stay tuned, we have a maritime pilot coming up, and we also have a climate services pilot coming into play in the next few months. Next slide. Well, that's it from me, and I'll turn it over to Young.
Yes, thank you. Thank you very much, Mark. So I would ask now to Young Baek to present the perspective of IHO. Please, Young.
Yeah, thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Good morning and good afternoon and good evening where you are. So thank you again for giving some opportunity to introduce the IHO activity and also the cooperation with the ISO and OGC. Now, the IHO is perhaps the organization with the longest transition in standardization of geoinformation system. So you know that we are starting to harmonize the cartographic features on printed navigational chart for ships long before this term was coined. So as the technology became increasingly digital, so we were pioneer in the field of digital cartography. Ships started to navigate based on the vectorized chart data set in the early 1990s. So long before all other transport carriers started to use such tools. A new element was the collaboration between the governmental sector represented by IHO member state, and equipment manufacturers in charge of delivery of end user devices. So you might not be surprised to hear that in the beginning, industry was faster than our standardization activity. But the introduction of this technology solely by the private sector soon turned into a dead end, since it was only based on proprietary solutions. IHO then took up the task of setting up and maintaining global standards for attributed entity of maritime domain, which was encoded according to an ISO standard and presented in a standardized way. This standardization framework was enormously successful and is today mandatory on all ships on international voyages. The dataset themselves cover the whole globe, are produced by more than 60 coastal states. All of them are IHO member states. While on the surface, this sounds good, the underlying technology for these standards stem from the early 90s. The creation of data production software is costly and difficult to maintain, so it is the software running on the end user device at sea. This calls for more active solution based on global practice in standardization for geoinformation systems. The global procedures are established by ISO for data modeling and encoding, and by OGC for transmission, presentation, and interface with end users. The second reason to reshape the technical outline of the IHO standard, which up until recently were designated for shipborne surface navigation, is the tremendous growth in the community of stakeholders using marine geodata. Thanks to the groundwork done by ISO with the IS 19100 series, and also with OGC open source technology, the next generation of hydrographic dataset will be interoperable and easy to integrate in any modern geoinformation systems. This is the key benefit for any discipline which is related to the sea, and is the basic consideration for IHO new standard, which is the S100 framework. The role of IHO as one of the three SDO is twofold. The first, to apply the ISO 19100 concept to develop a web-based registry for specific domains of global relevance, such as those for hydrography. And the second, to define standards for interoperable data product to cover widest range of marine geoinformation, from hydrography via the oceanography to the marine methodology. The IHO has two roles here: the workbench for standardized geoinformation tool based on global standards, and the creation of a global task field for their sustainability. Our completeness brought into the recent update of the standards guides. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much also to you, Young, and also to Mark and Agneta, all of them presenting their perspectives of all three organizations that have been involved in this work. Before we dive into the details about the standards guides, I will invite now to present us a bit of objectives and expected outcomes by person without whom this, let's say, seminar wouldn't happen today as well, and that she invested also a lot of work here. So please, Serena Kotsi from South Africa, if you can present quickly the objective and expected outcomes.
Yes, I think Agneta will further talk about this in the summary, and hello everybody. So the idea with the standards guide is to raise awareness of the role of global standards for interoperability. And when I talk about the target audiences just now in my introduction, I'll show you who we aimed the standards guide at, so that when you look at the standards guide also to see in which parts of the standards guide which aspects of standards will be addressed. So I think it's a nice overview of the standards between the three organizations, also understanding how these standards link to each other. All of that is addressed. And then it also, we hope to encourage with the standards guide some participation in the standards development process. So bringing the standards closer to the people who use them, who could then also influence how they are developed. Thanks, Simon.
Thank you very much, Serena, for this objective introduction. So now it's time that we start diving in to the work, to the standards. And for the introductory part, Agneta will present us the summary part. So please, Agneta.
Thank you, Simon, and thank you, Serena, and previous speakers as well. I did take the liberty of actually, before me presenting the summary, the summary section in the standards guide, I want to take the opportunity to just give a little more background because, as I said, since the standard guide was born, so to say, to the world about 6 months ago or so, things have happened, and there was a formal UN GGIM meeting, plenary meeting, and decisions were taken. So I just wanted to share with you some things that I think is important moving forward now, looking at the standard guide. First of all, like I said, there was a UN GGIM session, virtual. It's usually in New York, but this time it was virtual. And at every yearly UN GGIM session, the three SDOs present at least a annual report. And sometimes we have a side event, and sometimes we have an introductory statement and so on. And I took a quote from the joint introductory statement, and this is on the web. It's published on the UN GGIM web. And I think this is really important, that our work is driven by requirements and practical needs identified by the global user community that you represent. We were then talking to the UN GGIM representatives, which are typically heads of National Land Survey, General Director Generals, or similar. We urge member states to participate in OGC, ISO TC211 and IHO programs and community activities. Stakeholder participation is a key to our success in delivering the standards that are needed to solve today's challenges as well as tomorrow's. And I think it is a key to our success. So that I think we all agree on that reaching, knowing the needs and getting the participation is the key. Because, I mean, we know that standards are needed. We cannot just end our business. I don't think so. Standards are needed, but participation and knowing the needs is a key, but it's sort of exactly how that key works. I think this is something that I will take into my retirement and for something for us all to figure out how to reach that level, because we know something is needed, but to respond to that exactly, I think this is the tricky part. Next slide, please. Also, at this formal meeting, there were formal decisions. So the decision number 11, that's the 11th session, the 11th year of the UN GGIM. Decision number 111 was about standards. And just I've highlighted some words there. The committee of experts, that is the UN GGIM committee, they welcomed and appreciated our work. They endorsed the third version of the standards guide. They urged member state and relevant stakeholders to actively use the standard guide, and also urged the member states to contribute practical examples to the guide and demonstrating the benefits. and to further participate in the development of geospatial standards. So at least there's an endorsement from the UNGGIM in this matter. They also urge the SDOs to also, of course, do our part and reaching out to member states and others to try to find out what could be done to advance the implementation of standards. So there is a formal endorsement here. Next slide, please. I think this is to some part already covered by the agenda, which basically gives an idea of the guide sections, but here they are again. There's the summary, and then you have the 7 sections, which we will go through. There are also annexes on various topics, and I believe that you who go through these will come back and refer to these annexes. I should also say that if this set of slides is shared, the link above is to the version, the PDF version on the UNGGIM formal website. But I think that maybe Mark, you will be the one maybe who should introduce the online version at some point, maybe now or maybe later. What do you say?
I think we should go through the guide at this point, Agneta, and maybe at the end when we summarize, we can unveil at least the draft online presence as we have it.
Thanks.
That might be a good approach.
Okay, so next slide, please. The last one before the actual summary. This was also in the presentation a few months ago. The approach was to align the new version of the standard guide with the integrated geospatial information framework, which is also a UNGGIM deliverable or deliverable from us to UNGGIM. So the restructuring was most of the work really, but along the line, when you restructure something, you always see things that you need to improve. So one thing that a part of the restructuring was to structure the guide according to the process that a country would go through, wanting to implement a standards as a part of their national infrastructure, geospatial infrastructure. So, and this diagram, we call the snake diagram, has sort of been the backbone of the work all along the line, and is actually the structure for the standard guide. And we wanted to also emphasize on the user stories or their case studies and so on. And I think we will come back to that going through the various versions. So next slide, please. Which is the actual summary. It's 1.5 pages in the report. It talks about the purpose. The purpose is, of course, as we've already mentioned here, to promote recommendations for the use of standards. And already, I think Serena mentioned it, and we'll come back to it, but actually in the summary also, it points out that the guide addresses different target audiences. And to me, this is one of the key things about any communication, including the standard guide. We have different levels of target audiences, and that also means different levels of understanding standards and different levels of roles and activities that you need to do. And the main focus of the guide is for the developers of interoperable solutions, but all other stakeholder or target audiences have benefit of this guide, which we will see when going through it, because it's also during each section pointing out what certain roles should pay attention to and be aware of. And also the guide, of course, tries to provide insight into the importance of managing changes in our changing world of new technologies and new uses and other developments. And also on the very first page, we also encourage any user, any reader to provide feedback. And I think we will come back to that at the end as well. So thank you. For me, this was a summary. Thank you.
Thank you, Agneta. And once again, I would like also to apologize to if there were any slides lost, as I said already, with through the emails and the clouds around some particular remark, I think you were missing one slide. I'm very sorry for that, and we will for sure make sure that it will be included in the final presentation that will be delivered on the web page. So I suggest now that we continue with the introduction. So I'm inviting back Serena to present the introduction part.
Thank you, Simon. Yeah, so as I said earlier, we had 4 different target audiences in mind, and they actually also align with the 4 elements that you will find in the IGIF. And I see Mark has written there in the chat that we also had this challenge of aligning the terminology of the IGIF with the terminology that we use in the standards organizations. The main target audience for this standards guide is the developers of interoperable solutions. So they are the kind of technical people who implement the standards. And the secondary target audience would be the decision makers who need to decide how to roll out a whole standards program for their country, for example. And then there's also some information for standards users, those people who just use the standard, but not on a technical level, just need to know what's in those standards. And then finally, I think a very other important group is those people who are practitioners in a certain field. And for them also, there's some important information to understand. And these are the ones that I think we would also like to attract to participate in the standards development. So if you look at the different sections of the standards guide, you'll see that we, well, first of all, in the introduction, we would tell you for each group what you would find in which section, and then you'll find a similar summary at the beginning of each section, hoping that when you look at the standards guide, you can then kind of select the pieces that are relevant to you from your point of view, and then if you need to delve into more details. Thank you.
So thank you, Serena. So I would suggest then to go to the next section, to the direction setting, which will be presented by Gilles. Gilles, are you here with us?
Yes, thank you, Simon, and thank you, Serena. I'm Jill Salago-Simmel, and I'm representing OGC as the lead for the direction setting section. And I'd like to thank all of the team who contributed to this section and provided review. The purpose of this section was to enable the readers to understand the benefits of standards and the importance of setting strategic goals to achieve different levels of geospatial maturity, to identify the types of standards required for increasing the capability and scale of collaboration, to understand the role of standards development organizations and how to participate in standards development, and of course, to understand the different types of standards and how they contribute to interoperability. So through standards awareness, readers of this section should gain an understanding of the practical use of standards to raise awareness of the benefits of moving towards a standards-based approach. This is really geared to all levels of government, the private sector, and academia. So that through this section, the users will understand the case for open standards, facilitating interoperability for data exchange among different products and services. Next slide, please. The guide builds off of the previous guides in taking a goal-based approach to implementation through this concept of tiers. So organizations and institutions and other information communities can start their journey. We're recognizing it as Serena suggested in the earlier slide, that there are different target audiences and they have different points along their journey towards interoperability and maturity. This tiers-based approach presents these as capabilities and a maturity continuum. It really presents it as a phased-based implementation approach, considering the different levels of experience and expertise of the different people involved. The standards guide is conveying this as this goals-based approach to implementation, and The standards and geospatial information that we see along this continuum can enable the different achievements at different levels of interoperability based on the maturity of an organization working with different standards, tools, requirements, and technologies. Now I'll turn it over to Irina to introduce the next section on understanding national needs. Irina.
Hello, everyone. So this chapter, Understanding the Needs, were developed by me and also Ping Peng. So this chapter is about understanding which standards are available to assess and address an organizational needs based on geospatial maturity level or tier, and also to understand how standards are evolving along with changing needs and technologies. And to assist our users, we provided a number of resources, like, for example, explanation about SKI ecosystems and technologies available. We also look at needs from three perspectives: user, data, and organizational. Because users may have different perspectives. It could be a researcher needing certain level of standards, or policymaker, or say data manager. In terms of data, we're looking at what data needs are for its acquisition or for archiving or for accessing. And with organizations, we're looking at needs where organizations just want to improve management of data, or it looking at collaboration within the same domain, or globally across multiple domains and organizational levels. And to assist with identifying needs, we developed these 5 different steps, which looking at different aspects and provide sort of a roadmap for identifying those, from determining what standards needs are at each of the tiers, depending on maturity of organization, moving towards matching our standards to their needs, developing roadmaps, and also identifying gaps. So next slide, please. So as I said, we're looking at different functionality provided by tiers, and whether it's just sharing maps over the web or moving towards specially enabled infrastructure. In our diagram, which help people to understand needs and to develop the roadmap, is this maturity diagram, and moving from spatial data infrastructure to spatial knowledge infrastructure. Another important component for this chapter is about data. So that's a new addition to the guide. That is quite important, and understanding data lifecycle and how standards can help to manage it, to preserve and archive data, but also provide with options for its discovery and access. So yeah, thank you. So I will pass it to the next presenter.
Thank you. So we are now switching to planning for change, and Tobias, please.
Good morning, everyone. This section was developed by myself, Mark Reichart, Peter Parslow, and others. And the main purpose of this section really is to provide a bit of insight into how other organizations have implemented and used standards to meet user needs. When you know, combined, particularly with the annexes, I think it provides some insight into the types of capabilities that really can be supported through standards adoption, and really ultimately one of the key goals of this section is to try to foster a recognition and some investment in promoting standards adoption, participation in the standards development process, and also identifying you know, opportunities to participate. Next slide, please. And really at the heart of this section is the three major functional components needed in order to be really successful to execute this type of the type of change that we're talking about, particularly when you look at this from a national scale, when looking to really manage standards nationally, and really comes down to a combination of governance, action, and sustainability. And the annexes have included examples on where governments have gone through this. So, the types of governance structures required at multiple levels needed to really manage the adoption and rollout of standards nationally. The section stresses the importance of having a governance framework, a legal framework to promote and essentially enforce and monitor standards compliance, and really stresses the need for leadership, and they're part of the process, and also the need to have a very robust communication and engagement strategy. However, this work doesn't take place in a silo, and other key factors to consider are really, what are the bridges to the communities that are actually doing the real work, the hands-on development of standards, both internationally and nationally, and how to promote and foster those connections, even with standards in place. The section talks about some of the mechanisms that can be used to essentially influence adoption. It's not just assuming that folks will change. In some cases, more directed controls or consequences are required. But ultimately, from a user perspective, particularly in this case, a developer perspective, standards are only useful if there are the tools that implement them available. So really partnering with industry and the developer community to provide the tools that actually implement the standards that make that type of alignment that we're trying to promote possible. But ultimately, the long-term need is for sustainability, and that's not just a case of having bodies manage the standards themselves, but there is a cost of continuing this work, and ultimately from a community perspective, there does need to be good management and communication of user benefits. Next slide, please. And finally, in addition to having the action plan itself, which would follow any commodity change initiative plan, is really critical to keep a close handle on the institutional arrangements needed. So again, governance, connections to the communities that are heavily and directly involved in the standards development process and rollout, and ensuring that the mechanisms are in place to make standards adoption possible and enforce compliance. And that's it for me.
Thank you, Tobias. I think we are now going into the action with taking action with Sankhi. Sankhi, are you with us here?
Yes, Simon. Could you let me share my screen, because I think I need to use my slide. Simon, can you?
Yes, I think your slides are incorporated here.
No, I think I made changes to the slide that this. I don't think it's there. So Yep. Good.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, yeah, you have it. So yeah, go back. Sorry. So I'll start.
Thank you yes. I was pretty sure that this was incorporated.
Okay, I'm sorry.
Yes.
I wanted to make sure. All right, this part is taking action part, actually implementing the standard. And the first question when I do the sort of a capacity building activities with some standard related organizations, the first question is, so what standard do we need to implement first? It obviously depends on their situation, but this part, taking action, is trying to classify the standard into the tiers that we already explained, and give a specific some details on in terms of implementing standard. So we are following the basic tier structure. Next slide, please. So before we start the tier 1, we introduced the foundational standards. So general information, IT standard, internet standard, and other ICT related standards are also required to implement implementation. And also general geospatial standards, for example, 19100 series of TC211 standard are mostly general geospatial standards, data definitions, representation, data quality, all that. So these standards help to collect and produce and maintain geospatial data. So these are the foundational standards, and these are listed in an appendix. We have an appendix with the document, and we have an Excel sheet, and these are listed as general standards there. Next slide, please. No, back. Yeah. So the tier 1 standard is sharing maps over the web. View and query interactive maps on the map. So most obvious example would be the OGC Web Map service, and also for discovering and cataloging and discovering geodata, we need a metadata standard, which is 19115. So in tier 1, we emphasize that we need to have harmonized terminology and semantics, and data modeled based on this, and clear description of geodata, and ability to discover and visualize these. So we listed, I'm not going to go through all the list, but these are all listed up in a table and also appendices. Next slide. The second tier is from sharing maps on the web. We need to share data. And achieve interoperability within a community based on the standard. So most of the two important aspects of this would be distributed maintenance and use, and also domain data models. So we give examples of ISO OGC and ISO 19142 have feature service as for distributed maintenance and use. And domain data models, we have OGC CDGML, ISO land administration domain model, OGC land infra GML, and IHO S57 transfer standard for digital hydrographic data. So these domain models and these standards allow different communities to share geographic data. Next slide. Tier 3 is basically enabling, spatially enabling the nation. That's the title of the tier. And we have, the notion of foundation and framework data. And these data should be should use content and technology standard and best practices. And from this base, we can share geographic information and services throughout the whole country. And with this space, there are many services available from geo-analytics to mobile applications. And also we have OGC's DGGIS and the real-time sensor web enablement and geosemantics. So this tier is sort of the current fulfillment of the standard implementation stage. Next one, please. And this is the last tier titled Future Capabilities. And this is really a ongoing and ever-changing work. So we need to, we are seeing many more new data sources, and location data is being integrated into everything, and we need to really follow what's going on out there and keep up with developing relevant standard. And from data collection to data applications, we have many areas to look, and we have many technologies to look at, and we are seeing whole bunch of standards being developed from many different SDOs. So it is quite I don't know, confusing sometimes, but we need to look at the big picture and try to be relevant as much as possible. And these technologies are listed in the document, briefly explained, and some of the standards that are being developed are also listed there. So that is the last slide that I prepared. Thank you.
Thank you, Sang-hee. So we have here all the slides on board. So now we'll turn back to Mark and present the ongoing management. Please, Mark.
Thank you. So in the ongoing management section, we're looking quite a bit at how do we, now that we've established capability, how do we enter into a maintenance process? And so this section talks a lot about how to remain current with the evolving standards baseline, evolving technologies, how to interact with standards bodies to make sure that those new requirements are heard as those are discovered that may not be accommodated by the standards that exist in the global community, but also to allow nations to weigh in on the experiences of others through participation in communities of practice. Finally, it also looks at the value of compliance and certification and those types of tools to make sure that the baseline as it's maintained is evolving consistently with the expanding standards baseline. This slide shows some examples of a few of the communities of practice that are being documented. And our goal is that this edition 3 will become a very living document. And as communities become aware of its content, that we receive more input and ideas on additional communities of practice and other assets that we can incorporate into the online presence that I'll be showing in just a little bit. But this section is very much on ongoing management, and to Sang-hee's comment earlier, with the advancement of new technologies and the opportunity to adopt them, we really need to have a maintenance process from all perspectives to make sure that nations are aware of and can begin taking advantage of rapidly evolving technologies. Those technologies need to be standards enabled. Next slide. So I'm going to turn it now over to
achieving outcomes to Shane, and then
Shane.
we will come back, Mark, after Shane. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, so the purpose of this section of achieving outcomes was to enable readers to understand the importance of how standards will improve the sharing and use of geospatial information to optimize geospatial information management. We wanted them to understand the use cases and how to apply rapid mobilization of new sources of data and technology and to avoid that lock-in to specific technology providers. We wanted to understand the requirements to improve uptake of geospatial information across government with the private sector and citizens, and to create those efficiencies within geospatial data and the lifecycle management, particularly around saving effort, time and costs, and the reuse and repurpose of data. And finally was to understand the benefit realization and compliance of standards with the development of indicators and assess, monitor and evaluate through auditing exercises. As we were putting this part of the guide together, we wanted the readers to be able to take the guide and as a result, be a fully informed computer mapping expert. However, as everyone has put effort into the guide as authors, would probably be the first to inform all the readers that the path over time is filled with challenges, failures and victories. What this required us to do was to go through an iterative process of discovery and rediscovery and to learn and relearn what it takes to achieve successful outcomes. As the reader, they need to understand each situation is unique and quite often need to scramble over all the pieces to fit them together. As a result, the geospatial standards provides a comprehensive way of knowledge for a guideline. So next slide, please. There was three main aspects of positive outcomes that we achieved. And these were compliance success indicators and roles for success. Compliance was a systems of compliance to encourage and ensure organisations are implementing national and international standards and that they promote data sharing and use and verify the technology and products and services. Success indicators, we wanted to set indicators as targets and to find the benefits and how they would be measured and what evidence would be on that basis. It was to provide value to knowledge, to know and the objectives of implementing standards and achieving those arching goals. The roles and models of success, there we were able to define a range of training, reference material, and these things have been made freely available and been released through Appendix 8 of the guide. Okay, next slide, please. I think that's back to you, Mark.
Mark, so it's about the use cases, please.
Sure. So one of the things we've endeavored to do across the guide is to incorporate exemplars. The best way to understand the value of standards is to look at what others have done with those standards. And you'll see throughout the document examples that have been included that really bring forward how different standards frameworks are enabling communities. Everything from Inspire to looking at the Arctic SDI, to marine and other ocean implementations, and One Geology as an example of how the geologic surveys across the world are uniting on a common standards framework to make their data available both within and across their jurisdictions. So one of the things we want to do is to get those practical examples incorporated in the document, but also to bring in new examples whenever they're available, because that'll just increase the strength of this document and becoming a useful tool. We're also looking at identifying we know they're out there, additional sources of standards training that have been made available. A lot of those are openly available. The document has a few of those examples, but I'm sure there are more out there. And so we're looking with this document to make sure that the community can provide us with guidance, input on new resources that we can bring in to make this guide much more useful. And if we could go to the next slide, please. So one of the things I wanted to be able to do at this point is to show you a little bit of the online guide. Is there a chance that I could share my screen as we go through the
preparing that, because I see that this one is not, it's not a problem. I will just give you the
okay.
You can share it now.
All right, so in the presentation, you have a link to the actual online implementation of the guide. And as you can see, it's been brought up as a UN GGIN relevant guide supported by the 3 standards organizations. It includes a list of all the sections, and you can also follow the snake diagram and pick whatever section you would like to dig into. And it also includes references to all the appendices. So you heard Sanki talk about the standards inventory. That's available. And we hope to continue to maintain this standards inventory. And you'll see that not only are the standards listed, whether it's an ISO, IHO, or OGC standard, but it lists which tiers are applicable. So a lot of work by an incredible team has gone together to pull all this information together and to make it available online. And you'll notice that if you've taken a look at the PDF document that's available on the UN website, we've converted that into HTML, complete with links. So this will be available as an online resource to anyone who's interested. For those organizations that may have difficulty in accessing the web with efficiency, they can download a PDF version. And I think most importantly, we want feedback and input. So we've created a capability for folks to offer contributions, corrections, recommended corrections, etc., to the guide. We're hoping to do a formal launch in January. The team will be going through each of the sections to make sure that the conversion was done correctly and that it represents the baseline that's been posted on the UN GGIM website. And then hopefully with the launch in January, we can begin some active maintenance of the document. And I just want to point out that this document's being hosted by the OGC, but the plan going forward is that the IHO, ISO TC211, OGC combined team will be maintaining those sections going forward. And then on a regular basis, be it biannual or annual, we'll be updating the online presence to include new contributions and other maintenance that is relevant. So I'm really delighted that we've moved from now 3 versions of the guide to an actual living online document. And I would urge all of you to take a look at this online presence and let us know what you think, and definitely give us some ideas about what we can be doing to enhance the guide and make it more useful for the global community. I'll turn it back over to you, Simone.
Yes, thank you, Mark. I think we managed to switch this quite smoothly. So now I'm inviting back Agneta to share with us some final words with the summary and acknowledgements. Please, Agneta.
Okay, sure. There's a summary in the end of the summary of the section. Yeah, I think much of this has already been said by Mark and others. And thank you, Mark, for that that presentation of the online version. And I'm looking forward to, we need to connect in the coming weeks then and setting up the details about the maintenance and so on. So like Mark said, we welcome your comments and questions and ideas and inputs in terms of case studies and so on. And the link is here once again. yes, that is passed. The comments were requested. We had a deadline of 31st of October to the member states. And yes, here we have it again, November, December. And for the, you mentioned that, Mark, for the launch in January. So I think this has been said already. So is it the next slide then? There, as mentioned, there are lots of people that should be acknowledged here, and this is some of them you see here today and have heard the presentations from. This is only a list of those who have had leading roles in this work. We have also had a number of experts from the 3 standard development organizations. So we are intended to have a full list of people who have been involved and included input in the standards guide full version then on the web. And there's also a little bit about the history that we started in 2021 very early. And I must say, you're seldom in a working group that achieves such a great deliverable in such a short time. I mean, I think we had the first meeting at the end of January, and then we made a deliverable to the UN GGIM Secretariat somewhere early July, I think. So that's it, I think.
Okay.
On the acknowledgement.
Yes, thank you, Agneta. I'm just checking because we are coming to the close, to the end. If there are any additional questions from the audience, I haven't seen so far any. So if there are some questions, so please just react. If this is not the case at the moment, I would maybe then invite again, so let's say, all the representatives of all 3 organizations. So Jong, Mark, and Agneta for the final comments. So Jong, maybe if you can start first.
Yeah, yes, thanks, Simon. This standard guide document is a document has been revised through the cooperation between the 3 the key organization, ISO, OGC, and IHO. And expert and contributors, there are many behind. And also the support of the OGC and online version, thank you very much again, will be available soon, as it mentioned anytime during this session. And so thank you for all effort to make and manage it. So it will be beneficial for all nations and parties. And thank you again for your patience and participation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jon, for your nice concluding words. Mark, please.
I don't know how much more I can add to this, except to just to underscore my delight at the collaboration and partnership across these organizations, and not only in the standards guide, which was an incredible heavy lift, and just the enthusiasm and the drive of all of the members and staff who have come together to pull this document into reality, and all the other projects we're working on. You know, this is an example of where partnerships are just absolutely essential to solve many of the problems that we face today as a society. And I'm just so grateful to have been a part of this, and I look forward to further collaboration. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Mark, as well. Agneta, maybe your final comment?
Yeah, well, I can only add to what has been said by Jong and Mark. Just want a few comments here. I've been smiling here through the presentations when the presenters have said, oh, in this case you use the OGC, and then in this case, and then you use the ISO TC211. It's sort of, I mean, it's standards, and I think this is one of the purposes also, is to show that we are working together jointly in this. So, but I would also like to comment on the actual online presence of the standard guide. Working now in ISO TC211 for a few years, I can see this online version will have a great benefit in many ways. Partly because what I was talking about in the beginning, how do we find the magic key to participation and knowing the needs? I think this will help us to take a little bit step forward in this. And some example why I think so is that looking 1 year back, we had 3 different standard guides in TC211. Every time we spoke about a standard guide, there was it this one or this one or this one? There was something on the wiki. Now I think we're coming to a point where we can communicate that we have one standard guide. It's this one, and we will work with it jointly with the 3 SDOs. So it's an example of how we work together, and it will clarify that this is the one. Also, of course, having it online will make it easy to update, easy to edit, easy to find. It will be visible. So I think it will help us in many ways to reach out and maybe increase participation, encouraging members of all our organizations to contribute to things. So thank you.
Thank you, Agneta. So I think with this, we're coming slowly to an end. So at this point, I would like to thank you to all the presenters, to all the contributors, and especially as well to Serena that helped putting this seminar together. I hope that this seminar today have give you, let's say, good overview of the work that has been done by the experts of all contributing organizations. Let's hope to see you at the next edition of the Standards in Action seminar. So enjoy the plenary week and see you soon. Bye-bye.